I tried to talk while I painted, and I found that to be unbearable and very difficult, especially when I'm tackling really hard subjects like nail school and things like that. And so I wanted to do a couple of tutorials this way and just paint while I talk over them and give no thought about the painting and more about the topic. And a lot of you have become disenchanted and you've wanted to hear my story because you are just disenchanted. And my words to you are that a lot of you are very young and you don't you haven't come across a lot of trends yet. And once you understand what a trend is and what it isn't, uh, will help you immensely because then you can focus on the what's the most important. In my career, I have never depended on certain extras. And it wasn't because I was above it, it was because I couldn't afford it. And my time in nail school is probably where I should start my story and tell you a little bit about my work involved and what it bring to me. And so I'm going to try and stay as clear as possible about that time. I grew up very poor and to just my mother. My mother had been married many times and we had a strained relationship. My mother was somebody I took care of for a lot of my life, and she ended up having mental illnesses. I later in life come to know and understand and forgive, but at the time it was very difficult, and not a lot of people would agree with me because she had NPD, and so it's very difficult to see, and bipolar. It's difficult to see the dark when those types of disorders are out in public. They share this brightness and nobody sees the dark, and then they go home and you see this totally different character. And so that was what I was raised with, and I didn't know what to trust and I didn't know what to think. And so I started working very young in my life, and I even faked my birthday and everything because I wanted to work earlier and get a car earlier so I could drive right when I could drive. Um, I also went through school with a false last name because when one of my mom's marriages, oh gosh, um, my mother changed my last name illegally and never got the paperwork done. And I went all through school with the wrong last name. And basically, she took my name and gave me whatever name she thought fit me. And so when nail school was there, I have to back up a little, I think. Hold on. Okay, so with my mother being how she was, and me working so hard, by the time that I was 17, I was already stressed out. And I was starting to get fired from a lot of jobs, and I couldn't keep myself straight, and I became disenchanted. And I had been given a scholarship, and I started school in college, and then when I got there, it was 1987, and so like computers were just now getting made. There were I could still handwrite my essays. I could still print my essays and turn them in, but more and more professors were wanting you to type them and print them, and I didn't even know how to type or print at all. I mean, I could type from junior high, but not print or anything, and I was terrified of computers, terrified. And even one of my essays were about the fear of computers, and I remember getting a D on it, and I didn't understand why nobody else was as scared as me, and I didn't understand it. But A long story short, I quit college because I just couldn't keep up my work, and because they were saying that fine art wasn't going to be in our future. It would be all computer. And I didn't want to learn computer, and I was just into fine art, and so I was like, why go and waste my time and someone else's money? And I quit. During my high school, it was my dream to go to New York and go to the factory and hang out with Andy Warhol. Everything that I could find and read about Andy Warhol, I did. And I knew everyone at the factory. I read as much as I could. And I had the Interview magazine, and I read it like from cover to cover. And that is how I learned about the makeup artist, Kevin Alcoen, and I was in love with his work and the way that he could make anything beautiful and bright and change. And he was the person that was solely responsible from taking this pink, ashy foundation and putting warm tones into them and mixing colors on it. And oh my gosh, he made all of them. I could look at someone's face and see that it was Kevin's work, and I was like, wow, Kevin did that makeup, I know it, and stuff like that. And then there was Andy in the factory and all of this pop art and all of this, this art that was very, very distorted and yet so real and fleshy and just wise. And I was excited to do this. I was excited to go and just be poor over there, And then 3 months before I graduated, Andy Warhol died. And it was from a very routine surgery, and one that I would have myself. It was gallbladder surgery, and it was very painful. but this at this time, I was completely destroyed. My dream was destroyed, and by the summer of '88, when Jean-Michel Basquiat passed away, my dream was dead. It was just dead. I didn't have any reason at all. And that is when I began selling drugs. And I sold drugs for quite a while, but it was really after Andy Warhol that I began really messing with it and getting involved and seeing that I could be thin and not care and not have a dream and just keep going with this nihilistic view of what my future would hold. I didn't want a future. I didn't have a future. My future was dead. And so I was lost. And then when I was driving one day, I was in a horrific accident. I got a blind spot because when you live in Las Vegas in the morning, everything is white when the sun comes up, and I had a blind spot, and I ended up hitting a semi head on at about 45 to 55 miles an hour, and it ripped my car in half. But when my car was rolling on the side of the road, it hit another truck, and that ended up in a lawsuit, and they won. And I was just, all of my working and dealing drugs, it went to that, and to it was like taking everything from me, like everything, all my dreams, my ability to drive myself, my ability to stay away from my mother. I moved back home, and I was just in a very low place. And then my friend came over, and she was a friend that we partied together a lot, and she was just cool, and she said, Robin, let's go to this nail school, and I want to go and learn nails. And I had never worn nails, or I never even looked at nails. Nails are never a part of my life at all. And I was like, oh gosh. But I looked around in my house and my mom and everything, and I'm like, oh gosh, okay. So I go to this nail school, and inside this nail school, and let me remind you that where I'm from, it it's all low income. It's all low struggling income, and that's the way I was born and raised. I mean, just struggling low income. People did not want to drive in my neighborhood, especially at night, and that gave me kind of this sense of safety because that's where I grew up. And so I would drive home and feel like I was in a bubble of safety. And yeah, um, police would pull me over and say, "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" and stuff like that. And are you prostituting and things? Because I'm from Vegas, you know. Um, they wanted to know all these things. But once the cops knew who you were, the new cops and stuff figured out, and they didn't bother me, after that. And it was safe. And so you going across town to this nail school and going inside, it was like it seemed like everybody was entitled and better than I was, and it was all black and white and shiny, and everybody, it seemed just better. And I felt low. I don't know how to explain it, but when my dream died, it's like I just felt low, really low. And I started looking to the nail school, and it's almost like in a rabid way. I was just looking around at like, what is this? What is it? What is it? And I'm looking, and there's all these people doing these hair everywhere, and everything is chromed out, or steel and clean, and everybody's wearing smocks. That's what they're all wearing smocks, and now I understand a good smock, but back then I didn't. And I'm like, okay. So I looked around, and they gave me this tour, and I'm looking at everybody, and I'm being very judgmental. I'm like, wow, it's all these beautiful white girls that have messed up. And I was thinking about beauty school dropout, and like how people who have nothing else, they come here, and people that are in trouble with their parents get sent to beauty school, and you're gonna at least go to beauty school, like trade. And I was like, well, I am one of those people in a certain way, in a certain way. I'm one of those people. And so I was like, okay. So I'm looking around, and it does not fit me at all. But in the corner, I see this really older black woman. And she has a cigarette in her mouth, and yes, you could smoke in the nail school. And she had it clenched, right? And I'm like, okay. And I look around, and then around, and this place is huge. It's like the size of a Walmart. Well, Kmart. And I look. By the way, it's now a food store, so it totally went under. But in the corner, there was this lady in a smock, and she's bent over, and there's these girls all around her. And I'm like, what is she doing, right? And there's this little stick, and back in the day, you had to glue sticks onto the back of the nail that was a half well, and then use a spray activator. I don't even think they had spray activator, but you'd have to let them dry, and then turn it over, and then start practicing. And so she had one of these pins with a nail on it, and she was doing dot daisies, and she had this craft paint. And my mom had a ton of craft paint, right? That's all she did was have craft paint. She did toll painting and one-stroke painting, which I'll get to later in my career. And all this paint, right? All these angle brushes, which I'll get into my career. And all this stuff. And so, okay. So I look at this chick, and she has nothing in common with me. But I look at her, and I think to myself, oh my gosh, you can do this. You can do this. And if you can do this long enough to where you don't get fired, then there is, hi Carl. So then there is hope for you, like maybe this could be something that you could do part-time, or at least something that, so anyways, I started thinking yes, right? So I'm watching her, and she looks at me, and we exchange a glance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe this is my future. And so I sign up, and with my girlfriend, we both end up going. And while I'm there, we're putting this area that is the nail part. And let me tell you, back in the day, we were like considered like lower than hairdressers. Absolutely, we still are. But like back then, it was like a blip. It was not even considered like in the same genre, but they didn't have anywhere to train us, and they wanted to make money on us, and we were a cash cow. So hey, let's cut up a little portion of the nail school, I mean of the hair school, and put nails there and make extra money. It was never a beautiful place to teach you about nails. It was an afterthought to get money for nails, because people that get their hair done want to get a pedicure and a manicure, and it never was considered something that would boom like it is right now. Never. It was an afterthought, and that's exactly how they treated us. So we had this little pamphlet that we had to fill out, do 10 manicures, 10 pedicures, 10 silk wraps, 10 paper wraps, 10 full sets of acrylic, and you had to learn your diseases and disorders and your law, and then you were out 500 hours, and that was it. 3 months, and that pretty much sums it up, right? And then the nail person would come and sign your packet when you had your 10 pedicures done, and then you were, if you had everything finished, then you would graduate, and that was it. And nobody really paid attention to us. We were smoking in the back and we were causing ruckus, and working on stuff and trying to do our best. And I started sitting next to this older lady that was smoking in the back, and she was my people, and I sat there and I started learning about her, and she and I became very good friends. And during that 3 months of nail school, I got kicked out a number of times. One was for clocking out, well, having someone get caught clocking out for me. And the second time, I was really, really loaded in the back, and I was eating a burrito, and they were calling my name, and they're like, Robin Moses, you have a patron. Robin Moses, you have a patron. And I was like, no, I don't. I have this burrito. And I was like fighting that. I was like totally mean. and and so I got kicked out for that, and then I got kicked out for tardies, I believe. But each time I would find myself with the with the owner of the school, and the owner of the school wanted my money, so she kept letting me come back, and at the same time saying that it was because, I had this gift and this talent, and I didn't believe I had a gift or a talent. I thought she was letting me back in because she wanted my money, because I was suspicious, because I was taught to be suspicious of everything. And so I was suspicious all through nail school, and I was horrible. But one of the few things that happened to me in nail school changed my life. And so these are the two things like that I think of, is that I met somebody who would change my life in nail school, and I would go on to work with her for 10 years, and that was that lady in the corner smoking that cigarette. Of course, I would work with her for over a decade, and so that will be in my stories. And the second is the pedicure. So while I was in nail school, there was this man who walked in, and he came in a Bentley, and he was very elderly, and he wanted his assistant wanted him to get a pedicure. We're in Vegas, mind you, so weird stuff happens all the time. Like nothing surprises you when you live and grow up in Vegas. You can see Mike Tyson at Odyssey Records right after he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. And you want to go up to him, but you're scared, so you don't. And like just weird things like that. Mr. T flipping you off, just crazy stuff. So this man rolls up in a Bentley, and they need him to get a pedicure, and nobody wants to do it, right? Everybody's busy. Everybody's got a patron. So they're like, Robin Moses, would you like to take this pedicure? It's not a usual pedicure for us, but we'll be behind you watching to make sure everything goes okay. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do that pedicure. And so they say, okay, well, we'll get you some extra towels. I was like, oh, look at them being nice to me. I was like, all right. So I sit down, and there's no pedicure chairs back then. You sit on the floor, and you have one of those bubble machines to. So he has one of those bubble machines, and he has his feet in it, and he takes out I take out his feet to begin the pedicure, and his toenails have not been groomed in years and years. And I look at him, and we look at each other, and he looks so sad, and he mouths the words, "I'm sorry," to me. He is absolutely mortified that I have to take on this task. And I am mortified that I have to take on this task with no experience. And there's no one around me to help. And I started with nippers, but they wouldn't, clippers, but they wouldn't work. And then I went to nippers, and they wouldn't work. And what I ended up having to do was use a file and file down almost an inch of nail. And every time I start to do that, his skin was so thin that he would bleed. And I remember being completely overwhelmed, and I just kept filing as soft and light as I could. And it was 2 hours, and the towels began being with blood. And I'm telling my instructors, what do I do? What do I do? And they're like, you just gotta have to keep going. You just have to keep going. And I'm looking, and after I'm finished, there's 11 towels. I counted them, and nobody helped me. And I was like, wow, these are professional women. And it just hit me, boom. I have to know what I'm doing, because no one is going to help me. And I looked at him, and I said, I hope that I did a good enough job for you. And he was so old. He was probably like close to 100, I would say. He was like in his 90s. And he had worked, and I found out that he had worked for Howard Hughes during the pedicure. And they also told me that he did not have hearing, so I was using my lips. I didn't know if he actually understood what I was saying, but I walked up, and I shook his hand, and I bowed to him a bit, and I went into the bathroom, and I just started crying, because it hit my heart that there were people out there that really did need a service, and I did not know how to fully understand what my job entailed until that moment, and that I was responsible, and that no one should have to have 11 towels for a pedicure, and that this was wrong, and that this was a school, and that I just started thinking about my own mortality and how I would like to be treated, and that it just gave me this intense moment of empathy. And I walked out a different person from that pedicure, and the people that handled him came and took him back in the Bentley, and said that he did work for Howard Hughes, and that he was extremely wealthy, and he had tipped me a large tip, first of my many large tips, and I will talk about that later in my story. But when I graduated, it was assumed that I would go and work with this woman that I met, and her cousin had a salon that she wanted me to work in, and we both lived in the same neighborhood ish, and there will be more of that in my story, of course, but I said, yes, I would love to work in your cousin's salon with you, but I have no ride. And she said, that's no problem. I will get you in the morning and take you to work with me. And I felt like, yes, this is good. I can get a job working with this awesome lady and her cousin, and start my job there, and hopefully I won't get fired, and hopefully it won't be like all of the other careers that I messed up, and I wouldn't be scared like these art classes. and everything was just coming together in its own way, and it didn't fit perfectly at all. And I saw clearly that it would be difficult for me to make a living. But even in nail school, with that stank brush and those awful paints, and I'd take some from my mom and bring them up to the school and start painting on people. And oh my gosh, I bet they were awful. And there was no such thing as cameras for nails back then. You could not, no one had a camera on them for one, and none of them could take a photo of a nail until like late 90s. And I'm going to just go ahead and argue that there haven't been any real good photos of nails even now. You can put filters on them and make them great, but they don't capture what the nails look like. And people really capitalize on that with those little movie photos where they just show the glitter for 4 seconds and show the glitter. I was like, oh gosh, what a lie. But it's because you can capture the best of nails or the worst of nails depending on the filter. But the real nails that you see in the street that are translating, I don't think that there's even a camera that can capture that yet, because it's just so tiny, and people, you can't see the tiny of it. That's why I'm starting to put pennies in my videos, is because the tiny of it is what you can't see. And so I'm painting on nails. I don't know if they translate, and it's all real bad paints and stuff, but I was having fun. And for the first time, I felt special. I felt special even there, and it was awful, but teaching them, this or that, while they're teaching me, I felt special. And then I graduated, and I felt accomplished that I finished something after getting kicked out so many times. And even though I didn't get a celebration party, and I didn't get any kind of party, in my heart I felt accomplished. And I think I will leave it right there. With that is mostly my nail art experience. And I didn't make any friends in nail school except for the nail girls that I worked with in that little cubicle that was offset to take our money. But I didn't learn a thing, but I made some friends. And it turned out that one of the guys that my mom was married to, his stepson was dating another girl that was in my class as well, and I don't remember her name, but that was weird. Just a whole bunch of weird little things like that just added up and made me realize I was in the right place. And I'll tell you about that I follow. I consider that Harvey, and I'll talk about Harvey later on in my story, but I think I'm gonna go next to the first shop I worked at, and what I learned, because that is where I truly learned how to do nails, and where I would meet the women that shaped and influenced me into who I am now more than any time else